And first and foremost, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. I totally understand. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of time, a lot of just financial commitment to be here. So even if it's virtual, I understand. So time is money, and so first and foremost, I just want to say thank you guys. Tonight's call is really, really, really important. Okay, super important. There are what I'm going to be talking about tonight is I've kind of been talking about this for probably the last 18 months to 2 years. Most of you guys have been thinking I've been crazy, but we're starting to see a ton of results because of some major legislation that was passed in January of 2020. Okay. I'm going to talk all about that tonight. I'm going to give you guys an update. But the other thing that's really confusing is there's a lot of old laws that are still applicable today, all the way dating back to 1991, that I think we're not paying attention to. And so I'm going to talk about all of that tonight, so you get a lot of clarity and know really the risk involved in, because I'm going to tell you right now, the risk have changed dramatically. I'm telling you guys, the legislation that passed in January of 2020 is so monumental. I'm talking, this is once in every 10 years, every 20 years. It's massive impact. And you really got to pay attention to this stuff, or you know what I'm telling you, you could be subject to major violations and fines. Okay. And I don't want to scare you guys. I just want to give you, typically when the fear is really just lack of understanding and lack of knowledge, right? Once I give you the information, once I give you the knowledge, then we want to remove that fear so that we know how to move forward and navigate what is happening in today's changing environment. And admittedly, look, there's stuff changing daily. It's pretty crazy right now. The carriers are running around like crazy, trying to implement all of these changes that quite frankly are just regulatory changes. But we're going to chat all about that tonight. All right. So hold on. Looks like Josh, you got your hand up, dude. I need to make you probably panelist. Hold on, buddy. Let me get you set up. Josh. Man, that's what happens when we get a lot of people in there. There you go, my friend. Let me promote you. All right, Josh, you should be promoted up, my friend. All right, cool.
I'm on.
Cool. All right. So Josh, if you can do me a massively big favor, my friend, if you could monitor a little bit of the chat box,
Yep.
right? And if we got questions, I think I'm going to get to probably most of the questions. I hope I'm very proactive on answering most of the questions, but if you could monitor that, don't hesitate to interrupt me. And with that said, let's get rocking and rolling on the presentation. So slideshow, play from start. Let's share the screen. We're going to change this over here, and we're going to share that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to get rocking and rolling. Let me actually one more change. There we go. I can see Josh now. All right, cool. All right, so hey, look, there is no doubt that text messaging is super hot, right? So whenever I say SMS message, that really is a text message. Right now, it's estimated that 2.7 trillion text messages will be sent by businesses by 2022. Okay, and it's no question why, because SMS text messaging is like a super engaging platform, right? As high as 98% of all text messages are open. Look, 90% of them are opened within the first 3 minutes, right? And 45% average response rate. I can tell you right now, there is no other marketing channel that can even come close to touching these statistics, right? But the truth of it is, there's a lot of room for improvement for the consumer experience. 63% of customers say, hey, look, they expect an opt-in, right, is required for all messaging, right? So the bottom line is they just want to raise their hand and say, hey, look, we expect to be able to opt in. We don't just want to be receiving these unwanted, unsolicited messages, even if I do have an existing relationship, okay? 92% said basically the information is really often not useful at all. And then as high as 93%, look, they really want to control the frequency, right? They want to specify the message frequency, okay? It's little, no doubt here, guys. Look, respecting the consumer preference is going to be the key, okay? Unwanted messages, unwanted text messaging, and even the cold calls, right? Unwanted text messaging, cold calls, ringless voicemails, right? They really do decrease the consumer trust and engagement, right? So once we erode that consumer trust as marketers, then what the consumer does, they're going to go complain to the carriers. They're going to go complain to government agencies, and then that really is going to harm deliverability, because what's going to happen is the carriers, and we're already starting to see a ton of this, start implementing all of this filtering and tracking and everything else, and it just really does impact all businesses. Okay, so there's a ton of changes to both long code and short code ecosystem. But look, it really is going to, in my opinion, it's going to improve the consumer trust and ultimately our ROI for each message as businesses that really use text messaging. Okay. There's a big shift in, all across the US. Now, again, I'm going to tell you guys a little secret here. All of these other text messaging platforms, guys like me, all of these other guys are probably going to come out and tell you all of the benefits and how they're being so proactive to make these changes, and the carriers are fighting the good fight, and they want to improve. They want to really improve the environment. But the truth be told, this is all forced regulation that was passed back in January of 2020. Okay, that's why I kept telling you guys, look, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I see it. The writing is on the wall. I've read the legislation. I've talked to my attorneys. There's no doubt that change is going to be forced. Okay, so right now they're trying to paint this picture that, hey, look, we're going to be the good guys, and we're going to self-correct. But the truth is, it really is all about regulation right now. Government regulation has stepped in. Okay, but how is this going to impact you? Okay, and what is a short code versus a long code, and what the heck is this A2P 10DLC stuff that you may be seeing and or hearing about? Okay, now a short code, you guys have probably all seen this. This was probably the biggest area of abuse, in my opinion, right? Because short codes, first and foremost, they came out on the scene, I don't know, it's probably 15, 20 years ago, maybe even longer. But the short codes were really designed for business communication. Now, it was not, there was not voice enablement on a short code. You can't call it. You can only text in. You guys have probably seen a ton of these, right? Lots of big national chains and things of that, national brands really use these to get you to opt in for discounts and things like that. And then they push you a lot of one-way communication. It wasn't really meant for two-way conversational text messaging, okay? Now, it was super expensive. Back in the day when these first were launched, I mean, you could pay upwards of $50, $60, $75, $100,000 to get your own private short code. So what happens whenever something like that is like, there's a benefit to marketers, businesses, what happens is then others step in, and they created this whole shared short code ecosystem. All right. And that really was whenever the abuse started heavily with the text messaging. Okay. So once that kind of became apparent, look, you couldn't really monitor it. So all of a sudden I couldn't tell if Josh and I shared the same short code. You wouldn't know, was it me sending you the message? Was it Josh sending you the message? Maybe you got tired of Josh's messages, so you opted out of his stuff, but then I still sent stuff from the same number. It was just really confusing, caused a lot of chaos. And so as of June 1st, shared short codes are no longer allowed. Okay. Now, short codes have come down in cost quite a bit. You can get them as anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month. The throughput on all of those are way higher. I mean, it literally is designed to send tons of messaging from business to consumers. Okay. That really is exactly what it's designed to do, but it's not conversational. Okay. So I don't know if it's the best messaging platform really for probably what most of you guys are trying to do. But hey, look, it is available if you guys have any questions or stuff like that. If you raise your hand, hey, we'll be happy to chat with you about it. To get your own short code, you do have to pay by quarter. So you probably have to come up with about $4,500 just to get started. It takes about 12 to 15 weeks to get set up and provisioned. And again, there's just a lot of challenges there, okay? And then finally, we have toll-free, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, Josh and I, we talked about it I think at boot camp. I think we talked about it at our marketing workshop. But whenever you are blast texting, right? So if you're sending a ton of text messages at any given time, you really do want to be using a 1-800 number, okay? 1-800 number, it's really designed for business communication, and the carriers know that, right? The consumers know that, right? If it's coming from an 800 number, that there's a level of expectation. There's a level of expectation that that is business communication. Okay, so there's still some things that you're going to do there. The changes that I'm going to talk about tonight are optional for your 800 number. I'm going to tell you, you're probably going to want to do them. Okay, but really, what I'm here to talk to you guys a lot about tonight is going to be A2P 10DLC. All right, now what the heck does that really mean? So A2P just simply means application to peer or application to person, right? So basically that really means any software system like REI BlackBook, right? Launch Control, Lead Sherpa, all of those type of platforms, Ring Central, all of those types of platforms really send messages over A2P. Okay, so that's application to peer. And then the others, like if I just pulled out my cell phone and sent Josh a text message, that would be what we call P2P. All right. And so what the carriers have really done is they said, hey, look, we're tired of all of this congestion on all these long codes, which is just a long code is just your normal phone number. Okay. So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, we want to create this whole network of A2P 10DLC. And instead of just letting anybody use those, we're going to actually make some new changes, and it's actually mandatory requirements. Like I said, this is really being regulated from the Traced Act. But there's some big changes. I'm going to outline those tonight. But really, I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good because really what we're talking about here is we're saying, hey, look, it's the power of the local number, right? Just like a normal phone number. So you'll be able to engage in more conversational type text messaging, right? Two-way texting. Okay. But we're also going to start requiring this whole verified ecosystem. And once we can verify that ecosystem, we're going to improve deliverability. I'm going to tell you exactly what that verification process is going to look like. But bottom line, guys, look, if you're not going to verify who you are and what you're sending anymore, then you're not going to be able to text message. All right. You're not going to be able to text message with the 10 DLC, with the long codes or anything like that. There's going to be increased penalties. It's going to cost more. As REI BlackBook, we're not even going to let you do it. You're going to have to register. We're going to talk a lot about that, why it's important. And actually, at the end of the day, this really is going to be a good thing. I think this is going to weed out a lot of the noise and congestion that's already out there. And the true players, I think, are going to rise to the top. And it really is going to be a good thing. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. All right. So first and foremost, hey, look, I am not an attorney. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night. This is not legal advice. This is just general information. We highly suggest you go talk to a local attorney, go talk to an attorney specifically about your business, your practices, to make sure that you are compliant, right? So follow your own legal counsel's advice. All right. So let's go back a little bit, right? To kind of understand where we're at, sometimes we have to go back. And this is actually Senator Fritz Halling from a 1991 congressional hearing. And this quote, I think, sums up their feelings quite nicely during this congressional hearing, right? It says, hey, look, calls are the scourge of modern civilization. They wake us up in the morning. They interrupt our dinner at night. They force the sick and elderly out of bed. They hound us until we want to rip the telephone right out of the wall. These calls are a nuisance and an invasion of privacy. Now, that was 1991, frankly, even before text messaging existed, before RVM existed, right? But a little known fact, the very first text message was sent in December of 1992, and it was simply Merry Christmas. That was the very first text message all the way back in 1992. So think about this, 1991. And how many of you guys, raise your hand right now, give me a hell yeah. What's changed, right? Like what's changed? How many of you guys feel this and understand the frustration of Senator Fritz Hallings right now, right? I mean, I know my cell phone blows up like crazy today for sure, okay? Without a doubt, all right? But let's go back. Let's look a little bit what we're talking about 1991. Again, that was 1991 before text messaging. But like I said, man, not much has changed. All right, we've been hit by 20. It says here, Americans were hit by just under 46 billion robocalls in 2020. So 46 billion. All right. But again, 1991, the hot new cell phone. What was going on? Look, only 3% of folks had a cell phone compared to today, 95% own cell phones. 90% relied exclusively on their landlines, whereas only 45% of people have landlines today. 0 text messages were sent. Remember, again, December 1992 was the very first text message. And then trillions of text messages are being sent. Trillions. Again, 2.7 trillion text messages will be sent in 2022 by businesses. Okay. And that doesn't even count all of the teenagers, right? Imagine how many actual trillions and trillions of text messages are being sent on a daily basis, right? Some other really important things to understand. Okay. And I give you all of this context to understand why some of this legislation was introduced back in 1991 in the first place. And whether we like it or not, those laws that were passed back in 1991 still apply today, still absolutely apply today. And I know everybody's really excited about some of this new Supreme Court. Literally on April 1st, Supreme Court made a really big ruling. And everybody's like, oh, okay, great. They updated everything. Nope. A lot of the stuff still stays the same. There was one thing that changed specifically, and I'm going to share that with you guys tonight. But at the end of the day, if we go back and we think about 1991, really, they were concerned with 3 big things at the time. Okay. First and foremost, this is the time when automated dialers were really becoming popular. And I'm not talking about the automated dialers like Mojo Dialer or Call Tools or Zen Call or any of those software-based auto dialers today. I'm talking about like old school physical dialers, right? Back in the mortgage days, I remember we had one of these big machines, had all kinds of cards and different lines, literally phone lines plugged into it. And it would absolutely be able to, it was a predictive dialer, right? So similar to the software today, this was actually hardware technology, same kind of concept, with a really big difference though, is that what they did is they would want to blanket an entire area code. So they would basically just say, hey, look, I want to call every phone number in 314. And the dialer would do that either sequentially, literally just start at 000 and then do 0001, right? And just do that because it could do it so fast. Or they would just, just actually do, it's really that sequential dialing. So it just, predictive dialing and sequential dialing just tie up everybody's lines, okay? And next thing you know, everybody's getting crushed with calls. Of course, the invasion of privacy was a really big thing, right? The constant ringing was considered an invasion, right? And then the other really big thing was cost shifting. Okay, so all of a sudden, if I sent you a fax, then guess what? You had to pay for the paper and the thermal. Like all of a sudden, I was literally shifting the cost of printing my marketing to you. Okay, but also back then, look, the cell phone plans, receiving text messages didn't even really start happening carrier to carrier, all of that stuff until the late 90s. Okay, so back in the early 90s, it was literally, hey, you could only text. If you're on AT&T, you can only text AT&T customers, right? So, but it cost extra money to text and all of these things. Whereas today, we've got unlimited call plans, unlimited texting, all of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't matter. The laws they passed back then apply today. Even though technologies change, even though the economics have changed, the laws still are very, very applicable. Okay. So bottom line, that was the 3 concerns. So what happens whenever things get out of hand? Look, regulators going to regulate, right? And what happened is the government comes in and regulates, right? What are they going to regulate? They're going to regulate who we can call, text, or fax. And you might as well throw ringless voicemail in that, okay? How you can call, text, or fax, what you can call, text, or fax, and when you can call, text, or fax, okay? Now, how did they do that? All right, there was some really key legislation, okay? In 1991, they passed what is known as, you'll hear it all the time, the TCPA Act, okay? That's kind of like the OG of compliance and regulation, all right? So if you go to a software site or a phone system or a texting platform, and you'll see this all the time, TCPA compliant. In fact, I'm sure REI BlackBook, we've probably said, hey, we're TCPA compliant, but let me give you guys a little added information here and knowledge, okay? This is a nugget, take it away, okay? They're all TCPA compliant, okay? They're all TCPA compliant if you use them correctly. So honestly, all of them are TCPA compliant. The responsibility of compliance still falls on you. So don't fall for, just because I can do it in the system means it's compliant. Okay. So really the responsibility of compliance is upon you, right? It's like, hey, look, guns don't, this gun is compliant if I use it correctly, but I can certainly go create or commit illegal crimes and acts, and I can use it in a very inappropriate way, which then that liability and responsibility falls on me if I use it incorrectly, right? So that's really what we're talking about here. And we're going to dive into the TCPA Act since it is the OG. And you really want to understand the key elements of the TCPA Act. Okay, so I'm going to cover those tonight. All right. Then, what happened is in 2003, look, the TCPA Act, it didn't really slow down much. Okay, didn't really deter. It didn't really deter much. And so finally, Congress got back together and they passed the Telemarketing and Consumer Fraud and Abuse Act in 2003. Now, this is actually where they introduced the Do Not Call registry. They're like, okay, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get everybody together. If you don't want to receive these calls, you go ahead and register. And now we're going to force all the businesses to make sure they check the list before you call, right? That's what we're going to do, right? So it's kind of like the old honor system. You got to go check it. All right. Now, Do Not Call registry, it's still applicable today. The other thing that this in 2003 introduced, which not many people pay attention to, is the telemarketing sales rules. There's some specific things you can and cannot do over the phone whenever you're conducting business. All right. I think some of these things you guys might be shocked about tonight. All right. And I'm going to disclose all of that in just a little bit. All right. So in 2000, so here's the big thing, right? So the Do Not Call registry and everything else, it's like, okay, so I can only see how this happens. I've been around a lot of smart marketers and before, and they're sitting there saying, okay, well, I can't make these calls on the Do Not Call list because if I call from my phone, then it's going to be really easy for them to report me and I'm in violation. It costs a lot of money. So here's what we're going to do. Now, all of a sudden, spoofing phone numbers became really popular. You guys have all seen this, right? All of a sudden, it looks like you're getting a phone call from a local area code. Maybe it almost resembles your phone number. And you're like, oh, I probably know them. And you go ahead and answer it, even though they're not your caller ID or anything else. And they literally, maybe you don't answer in time and then you call back and then, it's somebody like, I didn't call. That is spoofing. Okay. So I could literally call you and make it look like I called from Josh's cell phone. Right. All right. So guess what happens? Government steps in again in 2009. They passed the Truth in Caller ID Act to make spoofing illegal. Okay. So to make spoofing illegal. But truthfully, like I said, little to no impact on any of these, right? The TCPA Act, the Telecommunications Fraud Abuse Act, the Truth in Caller ID Act, it really was little deterrence because, quite frankly, they could still fly under the radar. They could still fly under the radar. It was super hard to track. And, the financial penalties really didn't match the rewards that they would achieve, right? So businesses would like, look, if I'm cold calling, I'm violating all this stuff, I might get slapped on the wrist. I might get a $500 fine here or there, or whatever. Not that big of an issue. And look, if they don't catch me in time, I'm all good, right? So I can do this today, wait 12 months and I'm in the clear, okay? So what happens? Regulators step in, okay? Again, nothing changed, right? So then regulators stepped in. And in 2020, the Telephone Robocall Abuse Criminal Enforcement and Deterrence Act was passed in 2020. That is the TRACE Act. There are three key areas there's a lot of other stuff that's in it, but there's three things that whenever I read it, I was like, okay, these are the three things that are going to really, really change the game. They first increased the statute of limitations. So now they've got more time. I'm going to tell you exactly how much time at the end of the presentation here. They increased the statute of limitations. They increased the financial penalties significantly. And they've implemented business registration and tracking. All right. So they're implementing business registration and tracking. And that is at the carrier level. Okay. That is at the carrier level. Okay. So let's jump in a little bit about the TCPA Act, okay? So the TCPA Act, I'm going to go through these really quick. I'll make sure we get you guys a copy of the slides. We'll throw this recording inside the REI BlackBook portal, so you guys have access to this and as well as the slides and things like that, all right? So this is really important to understand, all right? Unless the recipient, all right, has given prior express consent, then everything I'm about to go over applies, okay? So first and foremost, it prohibits solicitors from calling residences, either a landline or a cell phone, before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m., okay, local time. So that's in their local time, not when you're calling, their local time. And it is state specific, okay? So for instance, Kentucky, I think Kentucky's my kind of state, because they basically said, look, we don't want anybody's phone ringing before 10 a.m., okay? So you do need to look that up. In fact, I think we've got another guide. I'll make sure it's attached in the recordings in the download section, so you guys have access to that and you can see the state list. But look, you need to be responsible for going and checking this stuff all of the time, right? Because it does get updated, okay? So pay attention to this stuff, all right? The other thing it did was said, hey, look, the TCPA requires that you maintain an internal do not call list, right? So if you call a customer and they say, hey, look, remove me from your list, then that responsibility is on you, and you must maintain it for 5 years, okay? Maintain it for 5 years, honor it for 5 years. And the burden of maintaining that list is going to be on you. This is going to be one of the areas that REI BlackBook is going to help you shine, because of course, if they say, hey, we want to be removed, you just go ahead and opt them out. We're going to tag them. Let's remove them from all communications. And now you've got a documented record of that conversation, okay? The next thing, okay, it requires solicitors to honor the National Do Not Call Registry. It does require them to honor the National Do Not Call Registry. I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight too, because I think most of you are completely confused. You're like, I just need to scrub against the Do Not Call Registry. Nope, you need to register. And in fact, literally could be a penalty of up to $43,000 if you're making telemarketing calls and you haven't registered, okay? Requires solicitors to provide their name, the name of person or entity on whose behalf the call is being made, right? So if you've got somebody else making calls on your behalf, then you're still liable, right? A telephone number or address at which that person or entity may be contacted. It prohibits solicitation to residences that use an artificial voice or recording. So yes, think RVM. All right, prohibits solicitations to residences. Now, all of this stuff, guys, I'm going to tell you, I've got a nice little checklist, and it's just literally color coded, and it's going to show you red or green. What do I need to do based upon, what type of list you have, what type of line is it? Is it mobile line, versus a landline, all of that stuff. I'm going to give you guys that list tonight, okay? It also prohibits any call. This is really important, okay? So they basically came out and said, look, we want to prohibit. This is one of those areas where you got to think about 1991. And when they made this law, they said, look, we are tired of these damn auto dialers calling hospitals and physician offices and emergency numbers. And we're also tired of them calling cellular numbers, because now all of a sudden, those consumers that have cell phones, we're using these auto dialers to dial, right? And these customers are answering, and now the customer has to pay for the call, right? They were tired of it, okay? Now, granted, you don't have to pay today typically to receive that call on your cell phone, but guess what? The law didn't get updated and say, oh, carriers don't charge for that anymore. It still clearly specifically says that you cannot use an automated telephone dialing system to dial a cell phone, okay? That is super important. That is super important, okay? It prohibits auto-dialed calls that engage 2 or more lines of a multi-line business, right? So if I'm at a business, I've got multiple lines, you can't use an auto-dialer to dial a bit more than 2 lines at that business, okay? Or to engage 2 or more. So you can only call 1 line at a time. Prohibits unsolicited advertising faxes. I don't think that probably is going to impact too many of you guys, but it is part of the legislation. And then finally, look, this is really important too here, because there's a key difference in if you violate the TCPA. So it's basically, bottom line says, look, if you violate this, then you can be sued for up to $500 for each violation. So if you call somebody 5 times, then how much can you be sued for? That's $2,500, or recover actual monetary losses, whichever is greater, or they can seek an injunction, or they can do both. All right. That's in the event of any violation. That's like, hey, I didn't even know. I didn't meaningfully or intentionally, right? I didn't willfully make that mistake. Okay. Well, it was a mistake. I wasn't trying to do it though. It says, hey, look, in the event of a willful violation, then now all of a sudden it's up to 3 times the damages per incident. So it's basically $1,500 for each violation. So smart consumers, you probably have seen this. I know I've seen a ton of text messages being posted and stuff So you text somebody and all of a sudden they respond back and say, hey, look, you just violated the TCPA Act. I'm going to sue you, or just send me a check for $750. We don't have to get attorneys involved and da 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 da. Right. And I've seen this tons of times. I've seen some big name gurus. I know one in particular just wrote a $15,000 check for this exact scenario where they called that person 10 times. Okay. They called that person 10 times. All right. And ultimately ended up, and it was actually, I think, even more calls because they settled for $15,000. So it was even a bigger suit. But yeah, this is absolutely stuff that's happening right now today. I know somebody in the REI BlackBook Connect group, I forget who it was, but there was a post in there. They had paid $7,500. So look, if you don't think that people are getting sued and paying fines today, I promise you they are. Now, the truth of it is, you can fly under the radar. That's what everybody kind of tells you. It's like, hey, fly under the radar because there's so many cases and everything else. But look, it's literally a roll of the dice and absolute risk. It's a risk, and you got to weigh the risk versus reward. Okay. But I'm here to tell you, like these numbers are nothing compared to what's actually passed today. Okay. They literally fines up to $10,000 per violation. Okay. So whenever they updated the Trace Act in 2020, they said, hey, look, you know what? These businesses, that $1,500 wasn't enough. So now up to $10,000 in fines and penalties per violation. Okay. All right. So now the do not call registry. This is really important too, because a lot of people get confused on this. Look, if you are going to, there's three types of organizational functions. You're either a seller, you're a telemarketer, service provider. So you're a telemarketing company calling on behalf of a seller, or you're an exempt organization. You're one of those three. Okay. And bottom line, look, if you're calling to provide goods or services to the customer, you are a seller. All right. Every seller should subscribe to the area codes. They will pay the appropriate fee. And I'm going to talk about the fees in just a minute, and agree to the certification requirements in order to receive a subscription account number. That is a SAN number. So bottom line is, if you were making cold calls, if you're doing this telemarketing stuff, right? Texting, cold calling, if you're doing that stuff, then you need to be registered for the do not call, the do not call registry. Okay. And even if somebody else is calling, so let's say you go hire a telemarketing company and they're calling on your behalf. You can see right here, this is straight from the do not call registry. Look, the seller must have its own subscription and SAN separate from the telemarketer's subscription and SAN. Okay. So the telemarketing company has to register for their own SAN number. You have to register for your own SAN number, and then they can call on your behalf. But if you're not registered, there are lots of potential penalties here. Okay. So what really then falls on the requirements of the do not call registry? First and foremost, there's an annual subscription by area code. Okay. There's an annual subscription by area code. You need to synchronize your list at least every 31 days. The list is updated daily at 8 a.m. Okay. The data for up to 5 area codes. So this is going to apply to quite a few of you. Okay. So here in St. Louis, I've got 314, 573, 636. I've got a handful of area codes in my metropolitan statistical area, right? An MSA that up to 5 area codes is free. Okay. So beginning October 1st, 2020, right? The annual fee will be $66 per area code after 5. So if you want to add an additional area code, it's going to cost you $66 up to a maximum annual fee. So if you just say, hey, I want the national do not call registry, it's $18,044 or $18,044. Okay. So that's what it would cost for you to subscribe to the do not call list on a national level, right? Most of you are probably just going to need to pay, and that is an annual fee. Okay. That is an annual fee as well. Okay. All right. Now, this is actually pretty cool as well. So another little tidbit, but companies that have provided all, if you've registered, required all the other information, and you can actually, first of all, like I said, you don't have to pay five area codes or less. They do have a portal that you can plug in up to 10 numbers or less, right? 10 numbers or less. And it's basically an interactive, and it will just, permit small volume callers to really comply with the do not call registry requirements. So a lot of you guys could probably fall under this here if you're just making a handful of calls, right? Maybe we're driving for dollars and we skip trace the number. It's like, okay, now let's go check out those numbers. Are they on the do not call registry? Now let's go call. Okay. And you're going to be you're going to be in compliance, period. Right. Again, the fear comes from just not knowing and just being overwhelmed and not being clear. But once you got the data, it's like, okay, well, I'm clear. This is exactly what I do. Okay, fine. I go register. I get up to 5. And if I'm only making a handful of calls, then bam, I just use their interactive webpage at the donotcall.gov and away we go. All right. Now, what happens to companies that don't pay for access to the registry? Okay. So what happens to companies that don't pay for access to the registry? Okay, check this out. Look, you need to register, bottom line. Okay. A company that is a seller or a telemarketer could be liable for placing any telemarketing calls. Think about this, even to numbers not on the registry. Okay. So I make a call. It's not even on the do not call list. All right. Unless the seller has access to the registry and paid any required fees, violators may be subject to fines up to $43,792 per violation. Okay. Each call may be considered a separate violation. Let me ask you that right now. How many of you guys think one call knocks you out of business? One call knocks you out of business. All right. All right. And I guarantee you others, there's a number that's going to knock you out of business, right? There's a number that's going to knock you out of business. So Doug, I see you raised your hand. If you did that intentionally, let's do me a favor. And if you can, just use the Q&A and then Josh can monitor those questions and we'll be able to answer them, and or he can pause me and we'll be able to answer questions, but we'll get to it. All right. So the bottom line is this, right? The bottom line is this is TCPA still applies, right? There's some old rules. There's some old rules around cell phones because they didn't want the consumer to pay for your telemarketing call, right? So they basically said, look, auto dialers cannot go to cell phones anymore. That's why all this auto texting and all this other crap, that's why all of these, software providers always try to skate around this stuff. And we're going to talk about it specifically and show you guys what to do now. All right. Because the Supreme Court just made some really, really important legislative changes. All right.
Hey, Damon.
Yep.
Got a couple good questions here. Might be a good time to take a pause.
Yep. Let's do it.
Bria Johnson was asking, you mentioned a handful of calls. How many calls is that? Is there an actual number?
Literally going to allow you to search 10 phone numbers at a time, right? So if you're doing high volume and looking to make, 1,000 dials a day, then it's not going to work for you. But if you're doing what I just described, if you're driving for dollars, you're using Profit Drive, you skip trace the number, you're going to get a handful of numbers. You want to call that seller, then plug those numbers into the interactive do not call page, the do not call.gov, and then away you go. Now, that's it. I mean, you don't have to have any programming knowledge. You have to know shit. Okay. Literally, you take up to 10 phone numbers at a time and you can plug it into their web page and it'll tell you, spit back and say, look, are any of these numbers on the do not call registry? Now, let me give you guys some really sad news as well. And it's actually in the presentation a little bit later, but like there's 250 million numbers on the do not call registry. Okay. It's massive. It's massive. All right. So that's the one thing that, like, quite frankly, all of the stuff that we're doing, that's why I don't believe in cold calling and cold texting. So I don't believe in it. There's so many people already on the do not call registry and everything else that there's such a small amount that are actually not registered that it almost makes it not worth the time and the money. I know people will argue with me and everything else all day and tell me you got a bunch of deals from it and everything else. But I guarantee you 90% of marketers out there, they're doing this stuff, are absolutely in violation. I ask anybody, any guru, anybody else next, ask them what their SAN number is. And they'll be like, what? And it's like, oh, you don't have your SAN number? Well, guess what? Let's go back to this right here. What happens to companies that don't pay for access to the registry? Look, and go directly to donotcall.gov, guys. I literally copied and pasted this exact slide from donotcall.gov directly from their website today, right? So this isn't like stuff that I'm just making up or anything else. So most of these guys are in violation. I'm just telling you, okay? But if you're making calls, if you're making, calls to individual sellers, just go ahead and make sure they're not on that do not call list and register. Go register so that you have your subscriber account number, right? Okay, what other questions you got, Josh?
Another one, a few people commented on this, and I know this is always brought up, but it's the fact that you're not selling anything. You're trying to buy a house
Yeah.
from them.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to tell anybody that wants to argue that, I'm going to tell them to stand in front of a judge, stand in front of a court, and tell them that I was not soliciting my services. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the key there is you're still soliciting a service, although you're not
Yeah. Right.
selling a product, you're soliciting a service. And at the end of the day, to Damon's point, it's up to the interpretation of the judge. So
Yeah.
you can
They
argue
can
all you
sue you
want.
either way, right?
Yeah.
They can sue you either way and take you to court. But it also, if you go to do not call .gov, it's going to tell you right there, it's going to say includes any person or business who in connection with a telemarketing transaction provides, offers to provide, or arranges for others to provide goods or services to the customer. Goods or services. And ultimately what you are doing is you're soliciting your services. You're soliciting your services. And yeah, that does come up all the time. But again, guys, it's going to be hard for us to stand up in front of a judge and sit there and say, I wasn't really soliciting them. I wanted to buy their house. Right now, that's a really good point, though, as well. Though, maybe also want to bring this up. If they advertise their number, even if they're on the do not call registry or whatever, if they've advertised their property for sale, that is no longer an unsolicited call. So you can actually call those people. So cold calling that type of list, okay, there's room for that. Texting that type of list, there's room for that list, so long as, but the burden of proof is going to be on you that number, that property was advertised and that was the phone number, right? So you can't like, oh, that was the phone number. Here's the seller. Let's go skip trace it and find 5 other numbers. It's like, no, I advertised that phone number. So therefore it's no longer unsolicited to call that number. If I literally am telling you, hey, I want to sell my house. So FSBO lists and stuff like that. In fact, most of the time, now, again, if you're going to be telemarketing, you still need to register for the do not call list, even to that list. Remember right here, it says, even to numbers not on the registry. Okay. So you still need to go register. But if you're going to call FSBOs, this is what I tell most of the new folks to do. It's like, look, start calling for sale by owners, start calling that list to start talking to sellers so that you can start practicing and working on your conversational skills and building rapport before you start spending a ton of money on marketing. I want you to kind of cut your teeth on some for sale by owners, right? But you still need to register, okay? You still need to register. All right. The other thing that is included in that 2003 legislation was the TSR. This is the telemarketing sales rules. I'm going to skip through this really quick because a lot of this is probably not going to apply to you guys, but it's going to probably, again, this is one more thing that absolutely applies today. Okay. A telemarketer cannot ask you to pay cash-to-cash money transfer, right? So they can't ask you to use like MoneyGram or Western Union. So if anybody ever asks you to do that on a telemarketing call, that's illegal. They can't ask you to pay by giving a PIN from a cash reload card like Money Pack or Vanilla Reload. They can't ask for your bank account information to create a check, right, that you never see or sign, right? They must transmit their telephone number, so their caller ID has to come up. Now, again, they don't, a lot of them don't follow this stuff, but it is part of the telemarketing sales rules. All of this stuff is really important to kind of get refreshed on, because what they just passed with the Trace Act is going to be really easy to track you down now. Okay, it's going to be really easy to track you down. They got more time to do it. It's going to be stiffer penalties, and it's going to be easier for them to find you. Okay, and then telemarketers are required to connect their call to a sales rep within 2 seconds of a consumer's greeting. So this is going to be really important for all of you using like Mojo Dialer and call tools and all that stuff. Like, look, it's supposed to connect you to a representative within 2 seconds, okay, of them answering. It can't, so that's going to be really super important as well. All right. Now, really, this is really important, okay? I want to go back to this part right here, okay? This is important to understand right here, okay? Prohibits any call made using an automated telephone dialing system to a cellular telephone, okay? This was the one piece in the TCPA Act that got everybody was like, can you use text messaging? Can you not? Can you blast text? Can you do anything? Right? And can we do this to cell phones? Okay. And so this was really, really big. So an auto dialer, again, guys, is just, well, here's the problem. truthfully. There was no clear definition of what an auto dialer was. The actual language in the original TCPA Act of 1991 basically said, an auto dialer is anything that can generate a random or sequential numbers and or store potential numbers, right? So all of a sudden there was a ton of confusion. And so now all of a sudden, if you think about that, store a potential number could be my cell phone. So now all of a sudden a cell phone could be an auto dialer. You know what did that lead to? Look, whenever there's confusion, it just leads to a ton of litigation. So you can see there's a ton of litigation just started increasing, especially once they really started the automated dialer stuff started rocking and rolling. This, to Josh's point earlier, whenever you're standing in front of the judge, it's up to the judge's interpretation. And quite frankly, the courts couldn't agree, right? The DC court concluded, like, hey, look, the FCC's opinion that all equipment that has the potential capacity for auto dialing is subject to the TCPA is too broad, right? So then all of a sudden we had, let's see, the Second and Third Circuit courts, they kind of came out, they narrowly defined their interpretation. It was like looking promising. It's like, okay, now we're clear. But then all of a sudden the Ninth Circuit Court came up, stirred up, and went completely the opposite way. The bottom line, whenever there's a complete confusion and the courts can't really get clear, then, like, guys, straight up, this is hot off the press, right? April 1st, the Supreme Court finally ruled on what an automated telephone dialing system is, okay? And they adopted a very narrow definition, which is actually good news for marketers. What this basically means is they basically said, look, if it cannot, right, if it can't, to qualify as an, it has to be basically the capacity to either generate a random or sequential, let me start over. All right. They have to be able to generate the random numbers, right? Either randomly or sequential numbers. Okay. So whenever you look at a system like REI BlackBook, so that was always the confusion. The Ninth Circuit Court said basically, like, look, a system just like REI BlackBook, they ruled that it was an automated telephone dialing system. So now all of a sudden, any text message you send out or you call via cell phone, then all of a sudden that's like, hey, that's an automated telephone dialing system. You're in violation of the TCPA, right? But Supreme Court basically came out and said, hey guys, look, no, here's the deal. Unless it's generating the numbers, it is not an automated dialing system. So that basically means, hey, look, good news. REI BlackBook is no longer even questioned whether it is an ATDS. It is not an automated telephone dialing system. Supreme Court just made that very, very clear. So what does that mean? All right. Let's stay compliant. I'm going to give you guys why that's important in just a second here. I'll show you. But look, do not use an auto dialer if you do not have the required consent for marketing or even non-marketing calls. Okay. So if you're using an auto dialer, you can't even send informational calls out or text out. Okay. So it's really important to understand if you're using Mojo, you're using, call, I guarantee you go check and see if like those aren't necessarily auto dialers if they're not generating or generating or producing the number, right? So if you're taking the number, buying a list, so now if I buy a list, okay, I need to register for the do not call list registry. I need to scrub it against the do not call list. And now those numbers that are left over that are no longer on the do not call list, I can now upload those into a Mojo or Call Tools. And now I can use that without fear. So as long as I follow the do not call rules stuff, that's going to be really, really important. Now, if I'm using something to randomly generate the numbers, then I have to have written permission. Okay. You cannot dial anyone that's just randomly dialing numbers. Okay. And there are systems out there like that. All right. If you're using pre-recorded or artificial voice messages without first obtaining the prior express consent of all call recipients, okay, then, that is, don't do that. Do not use pre-recorded unless you have express consent. And you need to make sure that you enable a process for your customers to easily opt out of communications, right? If they do not wish to receive. REI BlackBook's already going to force you to do this because any text message or anything like that, like, look, they're going to be able to type in stop and then I'm going to remove them. You don't even have the option. So we're going to go ahead and force that compliance there. All right. You're going to continue to maintain an internal do not call list, all right, of the customers who've opted out. Make sure you're doing that. Scrub the call list against the national do not call and even the state list. That's another thing that I wanted to add. The states actually do have their own do not call list as well. So you need to register with this national, you need to register with the state, and then you need to scrub your call list against both. Okay. You need to comply with time of day and other restrictions of the telemarketing sales rule. Okay. Provide caller identification in all messages to customers and consumers. Okay. And then do not send communications containing false or misleading messages to consumers. Let's be good people, right? All right. So that you do those things, you're gonna be compliant. And then this is just kind of a visual chart. The reason I put this little red kind of drew this around the marketing. Here's how I want you guys to read this chart. We have different rules. The TCPA, remember, 1991, most folks had landlines. Only 3% had cell phones, right? So the rules were actually different for a landline and they were different for a cell phone. The other thing they did is they said, hey, look, we're going to have tighter restrictions for marketing calls. If it's a non-marketing call, then, it's going to be a lot more wide open, right? So if you're just calling for informational purposes, that's going to be your emergency broadcast type stuff, things like that. You can use auto dialer systems, pre-recorded voice, all of that's pretty much green light, right? But most of us, we're all paying attention to obviously marketing on both landline and cell phone, okay? So we're looking at landline, cell phone, marketing or non-marketing. And then basically over here, we're looking at how are we reaching that customer. So first of all is auto dialed. This was the biggest cause of all the legislation or all the lawsuits and everything else, and a ton of confusion. The Supreme Court just came out, said, hey, look, we're going to get really clear on this. So basically this moved all of that texting and using systems like REI BlackBook. It moved it and said, hey, look, those aren't auto dialed systems. They're not ATDSs. So now that falls into the manually dialed category. If you guys remember, you probably used other software systems and they were trying to skate around all these laws and rules. And they're like, well, if you press send on every text message, well, then that was manually dialed. So it wasn't considered an auto dialer. But the truth is there was a ton of legislation that ruled that wasn't accurate. Bottom line, Supreme Court really ruled and got that cleared up. So now systems like REI BlackBook would really be considered manually dialed because they are not an automated telephone dialing system. But you're going to see there's a different line here for pre-recorded voice. Okay, so that's going to be ringless voicemail, right? So ringless voicemail, look, you have to have prior express written consent for marketing to a landline. If you're going to market to a cell phone with an RVM, you have to have prior express written consent. Prior express written consent. Now, there's really three main ways to get prior express written consent. I'm going to talk to you guys about those. Quite frankly, I don't use marketing or RVMs in the marketing any longer, right? Like, I mean, I can tell you, look, I've been in business a long time. I'm sure we've done blackout stuff, used to do all kinds of stuff that I wouldn't do today. I got too much to lose, right? I got way too much to lose. And so I frankly would tell you right now, I would not use ringless voicemails to generate leads. I would not use those because quite frankly, how are you going to generate the lead if you don't have prior express written consent? If you have prior express written consent, now it's probably a different conversation anyways, right? So ringless voicemails for cold marketing is really a big no. Okay. I wouldn't do it. All right. Why do we have ringless voicemail though? Because quite frankly, once they opt in to a landing page, that is one way that you can get prior express written consent. Now that ringless voicemail is great in your follow-up sequences. Okay. It's great in your follow-up sequences. All right. So now systems like REI BlackBook, all right, green light go, with the exception, you still obviously have to follow the do not call list and the TSR rules, right? The telemarketing sales rules. Okay. So you got to get clear. This slide is super important. We got a lot of some clarifications down here, some footnotes. So prior express written consent requires written agreement signed by the consumer that includes, among other things, the telephone number that specifically authorized telemarketing by automatic dialing, texting, or pre-recorded voice that is not required as a condition of purchase. So you can't require it as a condition of purchase, okay? But there's definitely a way that you can get them to opt in on your landing pages on whenever you're texting, having them text in, you can get them to opt in via keyword, right? But even on your marketing and or on your landing page. So if I'm sending out a postcard and I'm telling them to text in, then I need to put that clear and conspicuous language that lets them know, hey, look, I'm going to be using automatic dialing and texting and or pre-recorded voice. And oh yeah, by the way, it's not required as a condition of purchase or engagement. Okay. Now, for non-marketing purposes, providing a cell phone in connection with a transaction generally constitutes prior express consent to be contacted at that number. Okay, so you can see here, we've got prior express written consent and prior express consent. So now all of a sudden we've got a non-marketing call. What does that really look like? That means, all right, I'm buying their house. They're engaged in a transaction. They gave me their cell phone. So now, right, can I send pre-recorded voice with updates on the file and updates on, the status of the transaction and things like that? Yes, because that would constitute prior express consent. Okay, if they've given me their cell phone number in basically as it relates to a transaction. All right, so just remember the do not call list restrictions are still going to apply, but if you have express written consent, then that will override the do not call list. Okay, and then opt-out notice and mechanism must be provided. Right, must be provided. And again, we're going to kind of force you to do some of that stuff inside of REI BlackBook. All right. So Josh, right here is probably a good time to make sure, it's 8 o'clock. I got quite a bit more content to go through because we still haven't even talked about the new stuff with the trade act.
We might have to do another one of these or a series because there's a lot of questions.
Okay. Well, good. Yeah. So here's what we will do, guys. If we got a ton of questions, look, I know this shit is overwhelming first and foremost, and I know I'm also going really fast because I'm trying to get through probably, trying to fit 3 hours of content in about 90 minutes. So I got about another half hour, and I want to answer questions here. I want to kind of get a general sense of the questions we have. And if I've got to do another one of these, guys, you know me, like straight up, I'm going to do another one of these. I want to make sure that you guys are very clear. Obviously, we're recording this. Go back, watch it again, read the slides, look through it, ask questions. But I'm going to tell you, it's not as complicated as it may seem. It's not as complicated as it may seem. But quite frankly, most of you don't need to be doing this shit in the first place. You don't need to be cold calling. You don't need to be cold texting. You don't need to be sending cold RVMs. There are better ways to market. There are better ways to market and create inbound leads, inbound people calling you, driving traffic to your website. There's tons of better ways to do that. And, Josh, that's actually probably what we should do. Is even do another webinar on that. It's like, hey, look, if this isn't for you and you don't want to follow all of this, technicality, maybe we can, like I already know we got tons of ways to make that better. Okay. But give me some of the questions. What do we got?
David, this is an easy one. So David Johnstone asked, can you only call the area codes you've registered for?
Yeah. It's not, can you only call the area codes? But you're going to have to, they're only going to give you the do not call list for those 5 area codes. So now what you're going to do to call that number, if it's outside of the 5 area codes, you're not going to be able to scrub it. Right. So if I only have 314 and now I want to call somebody in 636, well, I only got the 314 do not call list. So how am I going to know if 636 is on the do not call list? Right. So The answer is you need to register for that particular area code of all the numbers that you're going to be calling.
And hey guys, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A. It's a little tough to go through and find it in the chat because there's a lot of different things going on in the chat. I'll try to get through some of those, but I'm looking at the Q&A first. Let's see.
So to answer that, you got to register for the area you're calling. It's going to cost you $66 per area code. Okay. $66 per area code above and beyond the 5. So that's probably going to cover the majority of what you're doing, And if it's one or two and it comes up in a list and you're like, all right, I got a handful of numbers, then just upload it, and see if they'll give it to you even outside of the area code. I don't know that they will, but you could certainly try that method.
Yeah, here's another good one. Jose asked about sending text messages. So he's talking about sending kind of manual text messages and he's getting blocked because he's got, some text messages that he's sending to realtors and even employees. And he's getting blocked. And so what's happening there, Jose, is, this is what Damon talked about at the beginning with A to P and P to P. Even though you're kind of manually typing it and sending it to one person, it's still coming from an application. And so, Damon, you can elaborate on that, but that's ultimately what's happening there. And he's sending it through REI BlackBook. So his question is, why?
Tons of things happening right now. Okay. And honestly, this shit is changing every day right now. And I'm going to get into that next, and it'll hopefully shed a little bit more light on this. But there's a ton of things that happen. Primarily, though, the biggest thing that's happening right now is I want you to think back to the late 90s. Email was rocking and rolling, right? We didn't have any problems. We could send email, and it was great, right? But then what happens is marketers get involved and they screw it up, okay? And then next thing you know, our inbox is flooded with Viagra and Cialis and da-da-da-da-da, right? And then the email providers, the email service providers came in and they said, okay, hey, look, we're going to start putting spam filters and blocking and da-da-da. We're going to do all that. And so that's exactly what's happening today. That's exactly what's happening today with text messages. So if you think about the email service providers, now the carriers, you know, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, all of the carriers are basically coming in and saying, look, you know what, we want to protect our customers and we're going to do things to block those numbers. And honestly, it's happening a lot more today because part of this damn Trace Act that I'm going to tell you guys about, one of the things that the government did is they said, hey, look, we are going to hold, and I forget we're basically not going to hold AT&T liable if they block a call. So they basically removed all liability from AT&T to block some of the calls that they thought were, and or text that they thought were like, were potentially spam. And so now all of a sudden you're seeing a lot more of those blocked calls because AT&T has no responsibility. And so they're creating all kinds of algorithms and everything else to block this stuff. So it's a constant game of cat and mouse, guys. You know, I was talking to another investor last night when I was chatting through this, and they're like, you know, I'm using this new service, man. It's freaking awesome. They're like, got this algorithm that dynamically changes the text message and the wording, and it rotates through 20 numbers, which by the way is illegal, rotates through all these numbers and da-da-da-da-da. And it's going to trick the algorithms of the carriers, man. And our deliverability is going to be higher. We're going to get it through. And I'm like, bullshit. If you think that engineering team of that software company is going to outsmart AT&T's budget of engineers, you're crazy. It's a constant game of cat and mouse. And frankly, most of you don't have the time, energy, or effort to continually fight that battle when there's so many better ways to do this. Okay. So there are now everything that I talked about in the beginning of the presentation is what I mean. Like, look, it's like, hey, look, once we can get to, you know, we still want the conversational text messaging. I want to do exactly what you're doing. And AT&T wants you to do that too, because they know their customers want it, right? They know their customers want it. But what they're saying is like, look, we need to verify who the hell you are because we got too many people sending a bunch of unwanted shit. And we're going to change that. And all of that stuff is changing right now. That's what I'm going to talk about next. But I want to make sure we don't have any other questions here. Okay. But that's what's happening right now. And you're seeing a lot of stuff being blocked and stuff like that. Okay.
A couple of people are asking how they check if people are on the do not call list. How do you scrub the numbers?
You have to register, and it's going to give you a list. It's literally going to give you a list. And then at that point in time, you have to check. And there's, you know, you can do this in Excel. You can do this other ways, depending upon how many people are in your area code database. There's other software technology out there. I can tell you right now, if enough of you guys really want me to do it, then I'll build a gosh dang system to do this. Okay.
So there's no real easy way to do it. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get the list, and you're going to have to create a way to do it. You're going to have to compare, and there's ways to do this, guys. I mean, you go to Fiverr and have somebody create you a system to upload. Here's my do not call list, and you just update it every day, and then you upload your list, and it scans it and everything else. If you guys want me to do that, and we get enough interest and everything else, then I would certainly consider it. Okay, but yeah, that's another challenge in cold calling. I mean, you got all this legal crap and everything else, and now you got the technical requirements and all the stuff changing on a regular basis. There's better ways to market. I promise you, there's better ways to market. This is why I've been on my high horse about it. And I know you guys think I'm crazy, and I respect that, but you're about to see even bigger changes. Okay. All right, Josh, any other questions?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot. What we're probably going to have to do is download the list of questions and probably go through, look at some common questions that people have. And then we'll probably just have to jump on another call. Maybe
I would be shocked if I don't answer a lot of them in the next handful of slides. Okay.
Yeah.
And if not, we'll do a Q&A at the end of the call here. Okay. So let's keep rocking this. We get through this tonight, at least. All right. So like I was saying, guys, look, I just downloaded this the other day. 221 million telephone numbers are on the do not call list. All right. So the chances of you getting a bunch of numbers to call are not that great anyways, because over a third of the population, over 2/3 of the population, I should say, are already on the do not call registry, right? So 221 million telephone numbers. There's only 330 million people in America. That's, kids, everything else, right? So how many actual end user consumers really are probably not on the do not call registry already? Texting and all that stuff is great, but it's really for follow-up. I'm telling you, if you use it as it's intended, and I think the carriers, you're going to have a lot more success with the carriers. Okay. All right. So this is really the big stuff that I want to dive into this a little bit deeper, because this is all of the stuff that is happening right now. And in fact, the carriers are being forced to implement all of this by June 30th of 2021, right? So it's chaos every day. I'm talking to carriers. We're on calls. We're on, Zoom calls, and they're giving us updates, and they say this, and then this changes. So this is a very fluid environment right now, admittedly. Okay. But there's some things are like, okay, hey, here's what's going on. All right. Bottom line, hey, look, I told you already, they've increased the financial penalties to $10,000 per violation, okay? And I will tell you straight up, they consider calls, texts, those are pretty much the same. And then the RVMs, those are artificial, so those are even more restricted, okay? So those are even more restricted, but they're increasing the fines $10,000 per call, okay? The Trace Act, like I said, look, they also increased the statute of limitations. They're giving themselves more time to come after you. It used to be 12 months. Now you can see here, look, finally they increased the statute of limitations to 4 years within which the FCC can propose a fine for spoofing and intentional robocall violations, okay? The other thing they're doing is they're implementing 2 technologies. It's stir and shaken, all right? Now I'm not gonna get into too much of this, right? But the bottom line is that what they're doing is this is to Jose's question earlier, they're like, man, I'm starting to see a lot more of my calls being blocked, right? And my text messages being blocked. And what's really happening is, like I said, they said, all right, we're going to increase the financial penalty. We're going to increase the statute of limitations. And look, the government basically came in and said, carriers, AT&T, Verizon, it is now your responsibility to implement better tracking. You have to know who is calling on your network. So if a consumer makes a complaint, then we, the FCC, knows exactly who made the complaint, right? And, oh yeah, by the way, carriers, since you're going to have to do that, we're going to go ahead and allow you to block calls and not necessarily even tell people that you didn't send their text message, you didn't deliver it, all right? And we're not going to hold you liable if you block any text messages, okay? So the carriers basically got together. Now this is all of them kind of working together to try to figure this out, but they're implementing what you'll see is called the stir shaken protocol. And really, this is just a way for them to really authenticate all of the callers, and even use some analytics services, some robocalls, some automated stuff to block text and block stuff and not deliver stuff with no liabilities. Okay, it's just a ton of stuff. It's all technical crap, but really, if you think about it, there's going to be 3 really big buckets. And these are kind of networks, okay? And what AT&T, all these carriers are going to come in and say, look, there's different types of way to validate a call and or text message, right? The first one is going to be say like, hey, look, this is grade A, this is green, this is really good. And it's basically to say, AT&T saying, hey, this is my customer. I gave them the telephone number, and this call originated on my network, right? So it's like, hey, that's Damon. He pays me. I gave him his cell phone number, and he's calling from my AT&T network. We know who he is. Absolutely, we know who he is. We can track that call right back to them, okay? Bam. And all of this technology is allowing them to do this. The next bucket is like, hey, look, this is my customer. The call originated on my network, but I did not give him that telephone number. So he's calling from a number I don't know. And there's, so now that's a little bit of further risk. Now, the third one is going to be like, hey, look, this call originated from outside of my network. Okay. That really is where most of the A to P messaging is falling, right? So we got to change that. And that's what AT&T, right? All of them said the same thing. Like, look, we want to change that. We want businesses to be able to send communication, but what we're going to do is we're going to create a separate network, basically software to people, basically A2P, application to peer, right? We're going to create a separate network for that traffic to go through. But in order to do that, here's what we're going to require of every business. All right. And this is going to be a requirement for all of you. Okay. If you want to send text messaging, especially on the 10 DLC, okay, the A2P 10 DLC network, you're going to have to register your company, right? You're going to register once with your information about your business. You're going to tell them about the vertical, your industry, what type, your size, your ID, your EIN number, all of that stuff is you're going to have to register. You're going to have to publish your website, and they're literally going to go bam, and they're going to determine a trust score. So imagine a credit score. You're going to get a trust score in order to be able to send text messaging. All right. And they've got automatic algorithms that are going to do this based upon, how you answer this and your business name and your business reputation and everything else. Okay. So and they are going to charge you registration fees. All right. So they are going to charge you registration fees. I don't think it's going to be much. Like what I've seen is like $4 or something like that. But yes, they're going to charge you $4 to register your company. So remember, they want to know two things. They want to know who you are, and they want to know what you're sending. So you're going to have to register your company. Next, you're going to have to register your campaign. Okay, your campaign. So you're going to say, hey, this is the use case. You're going to provide a description of what you're doing. You're going to add 2 sample messages. Right? You're going to add 2 sample messages, and that is going to determine the fee. Okay. So here, check this out. They are going to start imposing a fee per number if you want to use it for texting. If you want to use it to texting, then you're going to have to have your company register, and then you're going to have to register each number. Okay. Each number and campaign. All right. That will determine based upon what type of campaign you're using. And there's different use cases in campaigns, right? Some schools are going to come in and say, look, we're using this for our broadcasting system. That's a use case. Some of us can come in and say, hey, look, we're going to use this number for notifications to our active customers and or, hey, our employees, right? We're going to use this number for, all right, now this number, no, we're going to use this for marketing. Here's how we're going to get consent. That's the other thing they're going to want to know is how are you getting consent? How are you managing consent? So you're going to have to register that campaign. All of that is going to determine, and this is what's constantly changing right now, is it's going to impact the carrier and campaign fees. Okay, literally carrier and campaign fees and also the throughput. So how many messages can you send per second, and also how many messages can you send on a daily basis? How many messages can you send on a daily basis? Okay, so we're actively building this out right now to make this easier for you. Right. So you can easily come in, give us your company name, primary contact, industry, business type, website, your tax ID, your EIN number, all of that stuff. And then you're going to have to register those campaigns. Like I said, use case, the use case description, your sample text message. You're going to send 2 text messages. Exactly what do you send? And then messaging content and attributes. Right. So all of that is really going to come out, and your trust score is going to ultimately equal your throughput. Right. And so it is literally from 0 to 100. And you can see if you come out and you get a trust score of 0 to 24, they're basically saying, look, you're super risky. We are going to send 0.2 text messages per second, right? 0.2 text messages per second. I don't even know what the math is on that, of how many messages you'll be able to send out in 60 seconds, right? So what is the math on that? Times 0.2, 12, right? So you'll be able to send out 12 text messages per second. Okay. And you have a daily cap of 2,000. So you can kind of see how that goes, right? All the way up. And this is where it is good news. Okay. If you've got a high trust score, so you're doing this thing right, you're above board, then the carriers are going to say, hey, look, you can send up to 60 messages per second, up to 200,000 per day. Okay. So this is going to encourage good behavior, and ultimately they're gonna weed out the bad behavior, because there's a lot of things that bad behavior. First of all, you're going to get a low trust score. Then it's going to be really easy to track back, because you're going to have to register your business, your EIN. You have to tie all those phone numbers to your business, or quite frankly, like we won't even let you do it. Like I'm gonna tell you right now, we're going to force you to register on the 10 DLC. I guarantee you, most guys like me, most software guys are probably going to do the same thing for a couple of reasons. Because there's big financial penalties for me if you violate the rules. Okay. So I'm gonna force this stuff. All right. So at the end of the day, guys, it really does, short codes, the toll-free numbers, and then the local ATP numbers, all of this stuff is going to change. And what I'm going to do is open it up for questions. because I'll tell you right now, what most of you should be doing is figuring out what the heck is an inbound marketing strategy that I could leverage for real estate. All right. Now, some of you, let's go. We're going to get good trust scores and all that stuff. But I'm here to bet that we're all going to get penalized for our industry. This is the crap. This is the crap. Well, this is why I've been on my high horse for freaking 2 years, telling everybody to stop sending shit, because we're all going to pay the price. And I guarantee you, the carriers are going to look at the damn industry, and they're going to say, "Yep, you guys have a lot of bad apples, and we're going to take a hit just for the industry we're in." And they're going to look at the content, things like that. I promise you, our industry is going to take a hit for all the bad crap that, and it may not even been you, and that sucks. All right. But we work through it, and you continue to build that trust score, and you will be rewarded. You will be rewarded. So I think that long term, this is going to be really good for this marketing strategy and tactic. I think it's going to be limited anyways for like true marketing purposes, just because of the do not call stuff. More and more people are on the do not call registry. Everybody violates the do not call registry today because it's so hard to track down. You can fly under the radar, and the FBI has basically got to call me to find out who you are. It's all kinds of crazy crap, right? You can go out and get freaking numbers today and rotate and just bounce. All that shit's going to stop. Okay. So I think long term, it's a good sign for the industry. It really, truly is. I'm actually excited about it. And so I would encourage you to really dive deeper into alternative marketing strategies, which you should be doing anyways, right? You need probably 3 to 5 good, solid marketing channels. Go find, and we're happy to teach and educate on that. So Josh, I know we've been going for almost an hour and 20 minutes here. So let's go ahead and take the next 14, 15 minutes for Q&A, and let's try to wrap up by 8:30.
Yep. So David Johnstone asked a good question. I just answered it, but I think it's applicable for everybody. So he was asking, this registration, is it even for, is it only for outbound, or is it for people that also respond to an ad?
Yes. The answer is yes. If you want a text message on through BlackBook or through any other software company, you are going to have to register that phone number in order to communicate via texting. In order to communicate via text messaging, for sure.
In the short term, while we're working on getting all this registration made easy for you, if you're doing any kind of permission-based texting, like you have permission to maybe send your text messages out to a buyer's list or something like that, use toll-free numbers. Use 800 numbers, because right now the deliverability is a lot better, but that can change in a week.
Your inbound marketing, your one-to-one marketing, the deliverability should be really high. There's so many things that they track, right? They see how many messages come from your number. They know how many times are you sending out 1,000 messages. Does their network automatically get hit? They see all the content of the messages. They see all this stuff, right? And there's other software companies out there trying to outsmart the algorithms, everything else. You're just not going to do it, man. It's always just
not long term,
no-win solution, man. It's all short-term shit. So the one thing I would encourage you guys to do, keep your long codes today, your local numbers. Those should be for your inbound one-to-one marketing. The deliverability on those should be really good. They are looking for engagement, right? So they know how many people respond to your messages or how many messages you send and are being ignored. So make sure that you're sending, like, this is where, following Josh and some of the copy stuff that he does, you have to really ask really good, engaging questions so that they get response back, right? That's going to be really important in the coming months, is to make sure that they're tracking all of that stuff. Okay. There's so many stuff here. I mean, we could probably teach a whole full day workshop on this, which we might, depending upon the questions and everything else here, but let's keep rocking and rolling.
Yep. Rod asked for if you're using Mojo or a dialer like that, so you should only use the single line Mojo dialer, not the triple line.
No. What really the Supreme Court just did really helped Mojo dialer and call tools out quite a bit, because they basically said, look, an automated an ATDS system is all about the generating of the numbers. Okay. So the multi-line thing that I had mentioned, Mojo and all those guys, what I had mentioned specifically on the multi-line was it's actually very specific that if let's say REI BlackBook, I've got, typically what happens is, I've got, a number, and I've got, let's say a 314, 555 2500. Well, then I might also have 25001. So typically a phone company, especially back in the day, you get DID, direct inward dial numbers. I remember this, all shit's coming back to me from building out the phone system for Pepsi. This is crazy. But yeah, so you got all this block of DID numbers, right? So they might give you 2,500 to 3,000, right? You got 500 numbers. And so what these predictive dialers would do, all of a sudden they call 100 numbers at a time. And so now all of a sudden 2,500 to 2,600 is all completely busied out and nobody can call into the company. That's what's illegal. You can't hit a single company multiple lines. That's what you cannot do. That is very clearly stated. But actually having a multi-line dialer dialing out, that is that's still okay.
Perfect. Bobby Hubbard said, I don't see how any wholesaler will be able to text anymore.
Yeah, they will. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm telling you, like what I want you to understand is I agree with you that they're not going to be able to text really for cold marketing stuff. I don't think that the only effective list is they have to scrub it against the do not call list, right? They have to scrub it against the do not call list, and then they can send out their text messages, but they have to register. They absolutely have to register their freaking business, and they have to register the campaign. Those are probably going to be super low trust scores, by the way. Those are probably going to be super low trust scores. And then you're right, it's probably going to be limited effectiveness. And so can they still do it? Yes. Will the effectiveness be lowered? 100%, guys. And man, I can't express to you, this is exactly why I've been telling you guys this for so long, to lean into profit dial, lean into direct mail, lean into pay-per-click, lean into SEO, your inbound marketing strategies. That's what's going to separate the winners from the losers. Okay. And personally, I think this is going to be a good thing. You guys on this call tonight, you're in position to go ahead and get this stuff started today. Okay. So let's keep going with questions.
Mickey's got a good one. So we use REI BlackBook for our rentals and tenants. We send a text receipt or a rent receipt each month. We have approximately 40 to 50 tenants. First question, is that a campaign? Second question, is that what we will be charged for?
The answer is yes, but it's going to be different. So what I want you guys to understand, it's anywhere from $2 to $10 a month, depending upon what type of campaign it is, right? So that's probably going to be a lower cost per that number to send that campaign, right? So, and guys, I wish I could tell you an exact number right now, but I'm telling the carriers have changed this shit every day. Okay. Yep. So we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be kind of per carrier. But I just want you guys to kind of use a little bit of common sense here. And it's like, look, am I sending messages to people that want them? And do I have express written consent? So tenants, look, make it part of the damn contract. They sign it. They go to your landing page, but make sure you have that express written consent. And then whenever you submit those messages, now it's like, hey, look, we're sending notifications. Well, notifications that they're subscribed to, if you will, those are going to be a lot more accepted, if you will, and probably lower financial cost, as opposed to, hey, I'm sending, think about the wholesaler, right? I'm a wholesaler. This is the type of campaign I'm sending to people I don't know. Yeah, I'm scrubbing against the do not call list. I don't know them, but they own a house. And so now I'm going to go ahead and send them a text message to buy their house. That's probably going to be super low trust score. So the throughput's going to be really low. And it's going to cost the carriers are going to say, all right, we're going to probably charge you $10 a month to do that. Just for and like, by the way, guys, hey, like that's not going to Damon. That's not going to Josh. That's going to AT&T. That's going to Verizon. That's going to T-Mobile. And, so we're going to have to pass those costs on for sure. And once I know exactly what they are, we can get it locked in. I promise you guys, I will do another update and we'll give you an update. But I want you to use a little bit of common sense and just think about it. It's probably going to be lower cost, higher throughput, higher trust score for stuff that people want. If I'm a school and I'm sending out, broadcast messages, which I get all the time, then that's probably not going to be, it's going to be high throughput and low cost. Okay. All right. What other questions we have?
When do we need to get a SAN number to be 100% compliant?
Like yesterday. Guys, if you were cold calling, if you were telemarketing, which means you are calling, which remember, go back to the slide. Are you calling to offer basically a good or service, right? You're soliciting a good or service, then you need to register for a SAN number. Okay.
Yep.
If you're not cold calling at all, then you don't need it. If you're not telemarketing, you're not doing any of that stuff, then you don't need to. If you're creating all inbound stuff, then you don't have to go register for the SAN or the do not call list or anything else. But if you're cold calling and you're cold texting for marketing purposes and telemarketing, then yes, you definitely need to register.
A couple of questions got brought up about 800 numbers. So a couple people want to know, like, are 800 numbers just completely off the hook? Is none of this going to apply to 800 numbers?
No. So what they're doing is they're not necessarily forcing all the registration stuff yet on 1-800 numbers. They're not forcing that yet. I anticipate that probably will change. But if you do it, then you're going to get higher throughput on your 1-800 numbers. Okay. Yeah. So if you do it, you're going to get higher throughput. So we're more than likely going to make it, easy for you guys to register your 1-800 numbers too. But I do anticipate that changing, to be honest. But they're not off the hook, because the other side of this is carriers still get to filter and run, their own little algorithms to block your messages and everything else, whether it's coming from an 800 number or a 10 DLC number. It doesn't matter. The carriers still get to block the content. Okay. So, if I'm sending a Viagra ad from freaking, free Viagra, money, right? Then that's probably going to get blocked by the carrier, even if it comes from an 1-800 number. Okay.
Yep. Did you go through, a couple of people had questions about how they register a SAN number?
So you're going to have to go to donotcall.gov. I think it's telemarketer.donotcall.gov. But if you just go to donotcall.gov, scroll down, you're going to see, in fact, I'm sure I can probably pull it up on the website here.
Here, I'll look for it.
Since I'm sharing. Why is my screen not working? Yeah, so you're just going to go to the do not call it, and it's real simple. I mean, it's going to be very obvious on the National Do Not Call Registry, right? So this is all about, being a consumer. If you look right down here, it says telemarketing.donotcall.gov. You're going to click right here, and then what you're going to do is register new users. So you're going to come in here, click on register new users, and it's going to give you all of the information that you need to register, right? So it's going to give you all the information you need to register. And then, pick the area codes. And again, remember, five area codes, this is free. Okay. So 5 area codes are not going to charge you. So there's zero reason you should do this, especially for those of you guys that are just kind of doing the driving for dollars and cold calling just the driving for dollars properties. And it's very limited stuff. So, okay. All right. What other questions do we have?
Let's see. A couple people are asking about, whether or not we've got trainings on inbound marketing. So we did do a workshop a couple months ago on some different marketing strategies and how to build an inbound marketing.
We did part of our accelerator plans. We do monthly workshops, and Josh and I both, I think it's one of the best trainings we've done in a long time. We also have the Motivated Seller Guide on our front end website. So if you go to Motivated Seller, our front end website, so just www.rei BlackBook, okay? Then come up here, click on resources, and click on our Motivated Seller Guide. This is going to give you a handful of, it's going to give you, look, what are there? Direct mail. I'm going to tell you right now, Josh, we probably need to update this ringless voicemail, because that's definitely changed.
Yeah.
Bandit sign on wheels, another great inbound strategy. Driving for dollars, property finders, search engine optimization, Google ads, Facebook ads. And don't forget, you still can cold call FSBOs, right? You still need to register, right? You need to register the do not call list, get your SAN number, but you can still cold call FSBOs and things like that. We'll make sure that we update this, but we covered a lot of that stuff in the training, okay, in that 2-day workshop. So upgrade to the accelerator plan. It's $297. This wasn't a pitch tonight for the accelerator plan by any means, but if you want to dive into that training, go, you can literally upgrade for a week, 30 days, whatever. And then you can watch the training if you want. But I would encourage you to check out that accelerator plan anyways. There's a ton of value in that plan.
A couple people are asking about Google Voice. My assumption would be Google Voice is the same. It's going to be the same as already at BlackBook. It's A to P, right?
100%. Everything. If it's software, you're sending from software, then that is a application to peer.
If it's not your cell phone
It's
number,
basically like, are you manually typing from your cell phone? That is peer to peer, right? So if I send Josh a text message from my cell phone, that's peer to peer, P to P. Okay. And so AT&T, Verizon, they all know that. They basically said, hey, look, we're going to take that traffic, we're going to put it over here, and everything else we're going to lump into this A2P DLC. And so Google Voice, all that stuff is going to have the same issues. In fact, I'd be shocked if Google Voice keeps letting you text, because I can't imagine they want to build this whole registration process and everything else, but they very well may.
So it's 8:30, but Scott's got a good question here that I think we could squeeze in. He's asking how many phone numbers can be registered to the same company. For example, if you've got 10 or 15 different marketing numbers.
Yeah, there's not going to be to my knowledge, there's not going to be any limit. And it's changed a couple of times. At one point, they said, look, you're going to be able to register all your numbers kind of in block to the business. And then another time, they're like, no, you're going to have to register each phone number, because each phone number could be a different type of campaign, which will then determine your different costs. That's literally not determined yet, Scott. I mean, I wished I could give you the answer, man. But again, carriers have to have all of this stuff implemented by June 30th of 2021. And so we're expecting some really, really big updates in the next couple of weeks. But honestly, I was going to wait to do this presentation, but I was like, man, we can't keep waiting. You guys need to know this stuff, and you really need to get prepared. Okay. All right.
So, I mean, there's a lot of questions tonight. So I think like I said before, I think what we'll need to do is take a look. We can download all the questions, take a look, and we can probably do another follow-up call based on some of the questions, maybe go deeper in a couple places.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sounds great. So, hey guys, listen, if you guys think this type of training and just, webinar is great, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. I'm telling you right now, if you guys were at boot camp, I talked all about the 6 human needs. And one of my needs is absolutely, I'll tell you unabashedly, it's significance and uncertainty, right? That's my driving force. So I love doing these things, but only if you guys really think they're meaningful, right? I don't want to get on here and just kind of randomly babble on for, a couple of hours. So this has to be meaningful to you guys. And honestly, I want more people on these calls because I do think it's that important. If you guys agree with me, do me a huge favor, go to the Facebook group tonight. And that'll also determine, hey, look, should we do a follow-up webinar? When are we going to do that? How quickly are we going to do that? If you guys want more information, and maybe next webinar, what we can do, Josh, is not only can we answer the questions, we'll kind of go through the high level topics of this again, but then we'll give them some suggestions on probably what to do next. What are some good solutions and options to implement today, right? To make sure that this doesn't impact your business. If that's what you want to know, and you want to know, not just answer the questions, but have us give you some direct advice and direct suggestions on tactical advice, really what you should do to execute and have minimal impact on this. Go ahead and go to Facebook, go to the Facebook group, and make some comments on that. Let us know what you thought about tonight's training, and give us some feedback, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Yeah, a couple things here. Couple more questions came in. Yes, this was recorded, and Rod, to your point, he said, why not take some of the questions and make like an FAQ? So we are going to write some articles on some things that everybody will need to know. So we'll kind of distill some of this down into some different articles, and probably have one big one about everything you need to know. That will probably be updated on a semi-regular basis, just because this stuff's pretty fluid right now. Yep. So everybody will get the recording, and then we're also going to be posting it on our blog and on Facebook and everything as well.
All right. Well, hey, everybody, I appreciate you guys being on the call tonight. I don't want to scare you guys. Okay. This isn't about fear. This isn't about like, oh crap, the world's coming to an end, the sky's falling. There are some changes, but I'm sincere in my heart of hearts. I believe this is going to help us in the long run. Okay. Well, I want to weed out some of the bad apples in our industry and in other industries. I want my cell phone back, for God's sake. I don't even answer it anymore. I block everything unless it's somebody in my contact list. Okay. I want to get my cell phone back. And I think this is the first step. And I think it's going to help our industry overall. And I'm actually excited about it. It's going to be good. It is going to increase our deliverability. So long as we're doing the right things, right? Like, and which is, look, you should be doing that anyways. Respect the consumer, respect the customer. What do they want? And I promise you, they don't want to be inundated with a bunch of cold calls and unwanted text messages, okay? And I think there's better ways to do it, and we will guide you guys through that, okay? All right, guys. Hey, Josh, I appreciate you, buddy, and I'll see you tomorrow at the office, okay?
See you guys.
All right, see you, man.